Hello, everyone. Today we are going to be looking at the discipline of linguistics. I'm sure many of you may have heard this term previously, but you may not have known what it referred to. Today, I intend to provide some insight into this topic. Now, you're going to see that this is a very multifaceted subject as it covers a wide variety of areas. All right. So let's get into it. Now, linguistics. Before we get into linguistics, it is worth noting that this was the area that in which I pursued my undergraduate degree. My program, I should say, was linguistics with Spanish. So I majored in linguistics and my minor was in Spanish. Now, after we delve deeper into what linguistics is about, I think you'll understand why I chose that combination. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that you will understand. But linguistics is, as you see by the image that I have put on the screen, is language. But let's get a little deeper. Right. So what is it? Linguistics is the scientific study of language. Yes. This is the scientific study of I almost tripped up just now. But yeah, it is the scientific study of language. Oftentimes persons confuse the terms linguist and polyglot. Yes. I can't tell you how many times I have told persons that I studied linguistics and they constantly asked me how many languages I spoke. No, that is a confusion, that is a misconception. A polyglot is a person who speaks multiple languages. The number can vary, but I would say probably at least 4. And a linguist is someone who has a deep understanding of language. That person understands how to dissect a language, how to analyze a language, and they also know how that language impacts the world and the various impacts that that language has on the world is what we are going to look at a little bit further on in this lesson. So just remember that a linguist is someone who has a deep understanding of language itself, whereas a polyglot is someone who who has knowledge of multiple languages, okay? The objective of a linguist is to gain a comprehensive understanding of language, right, which I just explained. But the two terms are not mutually exclusive. What this means is that you can be both at the same time. But just because you're one does not automatically mean you're the other. So if I am a linguist, that does not automatically make me a polyglot or vice versa. Okay? To qualify as a polyglot, I must have knowledge of at least 4 languages, right? But to be a linguist, I would have to have studied linguistics so that I can gain that deep understanding of language, right? So the next time someone tells you that they study linguistics, please do not ask them how many languages they speak. I mean, you can ask them that, but I hope that is not coming from a place of confusion, okay? Because a linguist can be a polyglot too, because I can speak multiple languages, or I have knowledge of multiple languages, and I also have a deep understanding of language itself. So that's where the mutual exclusivity comes in, right? You can be both at the same time, but because you're one does not mean you're the other. Okay? So that's just a common misconception that I wanted to debunk, right? Or I wanted to clarify. Now, when it comes to linguistics, there are 6 main areas that we study or we focus on, okay? So we have morphology, syntax, semantics, phonetics, phonology, pragmatics. Now, some of these terms, or I would think most of these terms, sound very foreign, but trust me, they are not. If you have studied any language, right, you would have studied some aspect of the 6 areas that we are going to look at. It is just that you may not have been exposed to the jargon, to these technical terms, but I assure you that if you have studied language at any level, you would have looked at various aspects of these areas. Okay? Yes. So these are the 6 main areas that we look at when we study a language. And a key point that just emerged from what I have said. This is not limited to English or to your native tongue. This is across all languages, right? These are areas that we can analyze, that we can use to analyze every language, all right? I just want to make that clear. This is not limited to English, but because English is the mother tongue, or my mother tongue for that matter, I will use English as my base, all right? I will analyze, I will use the language of English, the English language to explain these concepts, okay? So let's start with morphology. This is the study of word formation. So the smallest linguistic unit with a grammatical function or meaning is known as a morpheme. So this is the smallest unit you can have. A morpheme can actually be a word or a word part. All right? If it is a word in and of itself, we call that a free morpheme. And if it is a word part, meaning that it is not a word by itself and it has to be joined to, it has to be joined, it has to be accompanied by something else to form a word. That's called a bound morpheme. All right. The affixation would be a very good way to think about morphology, prefixes and suffixes. So you know how in English we have prefixes which go before, and then we have suffixes that go at the end of the word. All right? And we put certain prefixes to create certain meanings, and we put certain suffixes at the end to create certain meanings. All of this is morphology, right? And if you look at the diagram that I have put on the screen, that is an example of a morphological tree. So we see how a word can be broken down. So we have the word irreplaceability. We have the root word, or the base word, which is going to be the word that cannot be broken down any further in place. All right. Then we go from, and that's a verb. So first of all, let's identify all the elements of the word. So the word is going to be placed, and the affixes, which can either be a prefix or a suffix. So the affixes would be those bound morphemes, right? So we have ear and re. And then able, that is going to be an affix in this context, because it goes at the end. These two are going to be suffixes, and ity. So it goes from a verb place, right? Then in keeping with the concept of verbs, it goes to replace. So if you put re before place, we get replace, right? Then we go to a then it changed to an adjective in replaceable. We add able here, replaceable, right? And then in keeping with an adjective, in keeping with the adjective, it goes to irreplaceable, and then it completely changes to a noun in irreplaceability. So we see how we can create new words or form new words by using affixes, by using prefixes and suffixes. This is how we break down a word. And I'm actually going to include a link to the video that I would have made on morphological trees and every other lesson that is related to linguistics. Okay, you'll be able to find those in the description. So morphology is just a study of words, word formation, the smallest unit of we could say yes, the smallest linguistic unit when it comes to words would be a morpheme. Morphemes can be bound or they can be free. Bound means that they must accompany other elements to form a word, and free means that it can basically function on its own as a word, right? Cool. Yeah, this is a science indeed. Syntax. Syntax refers to the study of sentence structure. So rules of syntax dictate that sentences must be arranged in a certain way so that grammatical sentences are created. As we know in English, a sentence must have a subject and a verb, sometimes an object depending on the type of verb we are dealing with, as we'll see in the example shortly. Right. So sentences can be broken down into constituents. So a constituent would be a group of words that go together. Basically, these are a collection of words that function as a unit, right? And you'll see this in the example shortly. So as I was saying, English, for a sentence to be grammatical, it must have a subject and a verb, right? Now let's look at the example. And English is generally an SVOS language, which means that this is the order of sentences in English. Subject, verb, object, right? So Mark gave the money to Jessica. So let's break down this sentence. We have the subject in Mark, we have the verb in give, and we have the money to Jessica. Now, if you look at this sentence, you will see that there are two objects, the money and to Jessica. Now, give is an example of a ditransitive verb, which means that it requires two objects. It requires a direct and an indirect. The direct is going to be the object, or yes, yes. The object, or it could be but usually in that case, the direct is going to be an object and the indirect is going to be a person. Yes, usually. So the direct is going to be the money because that is what receives the action of the verb to give. And then Jessica is the recipient of the direct object. So Jessica is going to be the indirect object. NP just stands for noun phrase, NP noun phrase, and in the money, and PP prepositional phrase. Now, if we were to say Mark gave the money and we left it like that, that would be ungrammatical because give is to give is a ditransitive verb. So we need two objects. So that would not be a complete sentence. that would be ungrammatical according to syntactical rules, right? An example of a transitive verb, which is a verb that just requires an object, in this case, a direct object, would be like a verb such as, let me think. Verbs like eat and sleep actually do not require objects. The objects are optional. But to be grammatically correct, those are fine, right? I know a lot of persons may think if you use eat, you must have an object. You must say what you eat, but not really, right? You don't need an object. An example of a transitive verb, a verb that requires an object would be a verb like, you could say watch. You need watch would require an object to watch, because you have to watch someone or something. So you can't just say I watch. You watch what? Right. Because the reason that the verb eat and whatnot, the verb eat doesn't require an object to be grammatical is that the verb in of itself implies already implies that, a substance is being consumed. So to mention that specific substance or whatever is being consumed is just additional information. All right. So to Jessica, that would be a constituent because you need the preposition and you need the noun phrase Jessica, which form a prepositional phrase. So those two have to go together. You can't say Mark gave the money Jessica to Jessica. All right. So syntax deals with sentence structure and how sentences need to be arranged in order for grammatical sentences to be created. An example in Spanish would be the adjectives placement, how adjectives normally follow the nouns, but in some contexts, they precede the nouns. So those are rules of syntax. So remember, syntax deals with sentence structure, word order, and such. Semantics. This is the study of meaning. So this studies how we use words and phrases to construct the meanings that we want. Let's look at the two sentences. And when it comes to semantics, the best example to explain semantics would be ambiguity, which is the characteristic of having more than one interpretation, right? So if we say something is ambiguous, a sentence, a word, what have you, we mean that there can be more than one interpretation, all right? So squad helps dog bite victim. If we look at that, that can have two meanings. One of the meanings is that the squad or the team helps the person who receive a dog bite, right? And the second interpretation is that the team encouraged the dog to bite the victim, whatever the person is. In that context, we do not know what like why they're a victim, but they're a victim. So those are the two interpretations this sentence can have. One, that the squad helps the person who received a dog bite. And the second interpretation is that the squad helps or encourages the dog to bite the victim. So the only way we are going to know which meaning is being conveyed is through context. More information would have to be provided, right? That is an example of how the arrangement of the words in a sentence can cause ambiguity. But the second example is going to be an example of ambiguity in one single word, okay? Chris went to the bank. The bank in of itself is an ambiguous word because it can refer to the edge of a river, right? Or it could refer to the financial institution, okay? So which one do we mean? Again, context would disambiguate that. But if you just look at those sentences without any context, they are open to more than one meaning, right? So when it comes to semantics, semantics deals with how we create meaning with the words that we use and the way we place words in a sentence, as you see in the first example with squad helps dog bite victim. Dog bite victim, the way those words are arranged results in ambiguity. All right. So yes, that would be semantics. Phonetics. Now we're getting a little more technical. So phonetics, this is the study of speech sounds. These sounds are known as phonemes. A phoneme is the smallest unit of sound that distinguishes one word from another. These are represented by the IPA. So a good example to illustrate this would be minimal pairs. And minimal pairs would be two words that only differ in one sound, right? So those two sounds that are different will represent phonemes because they help to distinguish those two words, okay? So for example, cat, bat. As you see in those two words, the only two sounds that are different would be the initial sounds. Cat, the C, the k, and bat, the b. Those sounds are different. So those are two separate phonemes, right? Yes. So this is phonetics. Phonetics deals with physical properties of speech. So as you see if you look to the right, the bottom right, you see examples of transcriptions. So as I said, these phonemes are based on the IPA chart, which is the International Phonetic Alphabet. These are symbols that are used to represent how different sounds. So we look at sing, and these are the phonemes that exist within the word sing. Okay? Yes. If you look in a dictionary, you would see if you were to look in a dictionary, you would see these transcriptions, which gives us an idea of what the word sounds like. As I said, phonetics deals with the physical properties of speech. Moving on to elaborating on that, we use three categories to describe a sound. So we determine whether it is voice or voiceless. So this refers to whether there's vibration in the vocal tract. We have place of articulation. This refers to where a sound is made. And manner, this refers to how it is made, how it is produced. So let's look at the phoneme P, right? So P is voiceless because there isn't any vibration in the vocal tract when you produce that sound. It is produced with the lips. So it is bilabial, that means with both lips. P, P, P. And in manner, it is called a plosive or stop. This is where there's a stoppage of airflow in the vocal tract, and this is followed by a release of air. So, plosive. You see? Plosive. The voice equivalent to this would be B. That's a much louder sound, so that's voiced. So this is how we describe sounds in phonetics. We determine whether they're voiceless, where they are articulated, and how they are articulated. So that's just an example of that. Phonetics. All right. So phonology, this is closely related to phonetics, but this refers to the study of speech patterns and distribution. So we can say that phonetics is more of the physical side, whereas phonology is more abstract. This is how sounds are stored in the mind, right? So we are able to devise rules by observing how sounds change depending on their environment. So this area of linguistics deals with sound system, the sound system of a language. Sorry, excuse me. So there are three types of distribution. Again, this deals with how sounds are arranged. So we have contrastive. If two sounds can be used to differentiate meaning, they are in contrastive distribution. That would be, we looked at that earlier with minimal pairs. Let's look at the words cat and cab. So we see that the only two sounds that are different would be the final sound, the t, the t in cat and the b in cab. They're in contrastive distribution because they can distinguish the two words apart, right? If we remove them, we would have the same, we would have C and A, right? So those are two separate phonemes, all right? So when it comes to contrastive distribution, we're dealing with minimal pairs. Two, complementary distribution. So if two sounds cannot occur within the same environment, they are in complementary distribution. So when it comes to complementary distribution, this is where we get phonological processes and predictable changes. This is also where we get allophones. Allophones would be a variant of a phoneme. A phoneme is a sound that is not really restricted, but an allophone is a variation of that phoneme that can only occur within a certain environment, right? So an example would be a and an. We already know that in English, a is followed by a consonant and an is followed by a vowel. Okay, so we know if we have an, that a vowel is going to be next. And egg, an umbrella. You don't say a umbrella, an umbrella. So that tells us that the change or whatever is coming next is predictable. So these cannot occur within the same environment because there are rules that dictate their usage. A is used before a consonant and an is used before a vowel. So complementary distribution is where we get the phonological processes. That's right. And free variation, if two sounds can occur in the same environment without changing the meaning of a word, they are in free variation. And data. However you pronounce it, and that may vary based on region. It is the same word. Data, same word. De, a, a. Those two vowel sounds do not affect meaning. So that's what we call free variation. They can occur in the same environment without changing the meaning of a word. So this is phonology. So the difference between phonetics and phonology. Phonetics deals with the physical properties of speech, right? As in representing it with the phonemes and whatnot, and describing the various sounds, as in voiced, voiceless, place of articulation, manner of articulation, whereas phonology just we study speech patterns and distribution, how sounds are arranged, and how these arrangements are used to create meaning, right? That's right. Pragmatics. So, this is the study of language in context. So it focuses on how context influences the interpretation of meaning in communication. So a good example of this would be, how are you? When we ask someone, how are you? We are not asking them to give us a detailed description on how they feel. We don't want to know that you had surgery on your, let's say you had bowel surgery yesterday or whenever you had it. In this context, generally, no. Of course, the situation that you're in would make a big difference, but generally, when we ask someone, how are you, we are not asking them to describe how they feel in detail. It's just a greeting. So most of the time, we just respond by saying, fine, thank you. How are you? And we expect the person to say the same. Of course, there are other situations where it may be more appropriate for you to provide a detailed answer. Like, for example, if you're at the doctor and the doctor asks you that, then of course he or she is going to want you to be detailed. But generally, if you are if you're a friend or family asks you that, then they're just greeting you. It's just a greeting. So this is an example of pragmatics, how context influences how language is interpreted. So as you see, how are you? That is interpreted as a greeting in most situations. But in other situations, like you mentioned, the situation with the doctor, you could actually take that literally. Mhm. So these are other branches of linguistics, how linguistics contributes to other areas or other disciplines, right? So we have sociolinguistics. This is linguistics having a major impact on sociology. This examines the relationship between language and society. So we examine how social factors such as age and gender influence language use. Mhm. Historical linguistics, this is the study of how languages have changed over time. As you know, language is very dynamic, so it is interesting to see how it got to this point, right? Computational linguistics, this is the analysis of language through the lens of computers. A good example of computational linguistics would be things like Siri, where the where computers are artificial intelligence is made to mimic human speech. So that would be an example of computational linguistics. Another example would be machine translation, right? So Google Translate, language apps, things like that. Mhm. Applied linguistics. So this is the use of linguistic knowledge to solve real-world problems, real-world language problems. Examples of this could be instruction, teaching, uh, using techniques to overcome language barriers or to teach languages more efficiently, interpretation or translation. Mhm. Those are examples of applied linguistics. Psycholinguistics would be the study of the mental processes involving the acquisition, perception, and production of language. All right, so this is where we go into the brain and we see how language is stored, right? This is also the area that would deal with how babies acquire language, right? How they go from babbling to one word, etc., etc. All of that will be studied in psycholinguistics because it deals with the brain. Okay? So as you see, it is a very very multifaceted topic, and it is very interesting. And I'm telling you that if you want to be a very proficient language teacher, you should pursue linguistics because it gives you that deep understanding that you need in order to help students to learn a language efficiently. All right. So I hope that you enjoyed this lesson. Thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next one.